Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hello everyone, welcome. In this video, I have some more fun products from the In Love Arts shop. I'll show you these products before we get into our card projects. First up is this Darling Hello Spring die. I really like the delicate font of this. The perfect sentiment for springtime card crafting. Next up is a set of wave border dies. You get 2 dies in this set. The piece of paper I'm holding up here is a standard A2 size, which is 5.5 by 4.25. And you can use both of these dies vertically or horizontally. The second die cuts out the whole wave, and there's so much you could do with this. It's just a fun die. Next is the Leaves Pattern Embossing Folder. I went ahead and embossed this, and here is what it looks like once you emboss it. It's so beautiful. Just love all of the delicate leaves on this. I really love floral layering stamp sets, and this one is called Flourishing Flowers. It stamps out a beautiful peony and the leaves around it. The next stamp I have is called the Tree Branches Background Stamp. That's a little bit smaller than your A2 sized card, as you can see here. I have another floral stamp, and this one is just called the Plant Leaf Flowers, and I love the size of this. It completely fills up an A2 sized card, and it'll just look gorgeous on a card panel, however you align it on your card. I really love big floral images to color in. And lastly, I have a set of 36 heart-shaped acrylic pearls. They come in 2 sizes. I don't have a lot of pearls or hearts in my stash, so I thought these would be fun to try. On my first card project, I'm using one of the wave border dies, and this one is my favorite. It's so unusual but fun to play with. I have 2 card panels taped together, and I wanted to die cut them in exactly the same place because I'm going to be doing some paper piecing. So I ran it through my Sizzix Big Shot machine twice, and it cut very nicely through both pieces of thick cardstock. I had to be careful with the tape because it did stick pretty good to the paper. I left a little bit of adhesive, but I can easily remove that with an adhesive eraser. I'll pull out the little piece inside the wave die, and isn't that cute? So I'm going to adhere 2 more pieces of paper together, the same green one and then a yellow one, and I'm going to die cut these. And I'm just going down the card panel, cutting out a bunch of waves. This die is a great way to use up your scraps, too, if you wanted to just cut out a bunch of waves and adhere them to a card panel. I think that would be so cute. Next, I'm using the yellow and the orange together, and this will be my last die cut on this panel. And here it is all cut out. Now I can start adhering these onto a piece of white cardstock. Let me pull out the little wave die cut first. And I am going to mix and match the colors of the wave die cuts. I'm going to completely cover this piece of cardstock with dot liner and start paper piecing all of these pieces together. So I'm putting on the orange wave next, and they're pretty easy to align and pop together. Now for the green. And this is just a fun process. I'm just going down the card panel with these different pieces. And you could do so many different color schemes with this. So much fun. But I wanted something bright and happy for this one. And then here is my last piece, the orange. I'll pull out my Fiskars paper trimmer, and I'm going to trim this down a little bit. This will be a little bit smaller than the standard A2 sized card. And now to put this onto my white card base. The word die is also from the In Love Arts shop. It says Good Times. And I layer this up 3 times just to make it a substantial piece on my card. Just gives it a little bit of fun dimension. And I'm going to pop that in the top right corner. I showed this die in a previous video, but I will have all of the links to these products listed below and over at my blog. I'm going to put on a few clear enamel dots. I just love these from the In Love Art Shop because they're so bright and clear. It just adds a fun touch of sparkle. And then once I'm happy with where they are, I'll just press them down into place. And here is a close-up of this finished card. I just love how bright and fun this one turned out. On the inside, I used some leftover scraps. For card number 2, I'm going to use the layering floral stamps. So you use the solid stamp first, and to ink this up, you want to use your lightest color. I don't have a lot of inks in my stash, so I'm just using a mishmash of what I do have. I use a lot of little teardrop inks from Memento. I bought a set of this at Hobby Lobby, and it was like years ago, and they're still going strong, so these are great inks. And now for the second layer. And the second layer, you want to use your second lightest color. And I do stamp these up twice just to make the stamping good and smooth. And then I flip the paper so that I can stamp 2 while I have the stamp image on the door of the Mini Misty. You could even stamp more if you wanted. And now for the third layer, I'm going to use this plum color from My Favorite Things. And as it builds up the color, it just looks so stunning. If you don't feel like coloring, these are great stamps to use. And then it has one more layer, so it has 4 layers altogether. I'm going to use a little bit of red for this one. These are very painterly images, so however you align them, it always just looks darling. I also stamp out this peony with purples off camera, but you'll see that here in a minute. But I am going to stamp the greenery next. So I put the solid image down first and use my lightest color of green. And this is a very pale green, so I do stamp it up twice, and then I can just flip the paper and stamp again. It's so fun and easy to use. And the greenery just has 3 stamps to it. So I'll line up the next one and I'll use my second lightest color on it. I really would like to add to my ink collection, but I don't use them too often except for layering images like this. I mostly just use my different art mediums to color in my stamped images. I think I'd like to get some from Altenew because they have the mini ink cubes or the regular sized cubes, and they also come in the color families. So if you use a lot of layering stamps like this, it has all of the colors that you need for it. But here is the finished work. Isn't that gorgeous? I fussy cut them off camera. Now I'm going to use another wave scallop die. This is a piece of soft gray cardstock. And I am going to cut this panel down a little bit so it's smaller than my card base. But I'll just gently fill up the adhesive so it doesn't rip my paper. And look at all of these cute little scallops. So much fun. And now to put this card together, I'm using a piece of purple paper first on my white card base. And it will have a little bit of a white border around it. On the gray panel, I'm going to pop it up with some Arteza foam tape. This will lift the scallops up off of the purple paper. Just is a very fun look. Now I'll peel off the release paper. I'm going to adhere this at the top of my panel. The purple cardstock really helps to make the scallops show up. They're so delicate and cute. Now before I attach my flowers, I am going to stamp out a sentiment. It says, "Thank you." This is from another set from the In Love Arts shop, but I love the font on this one and the size. I popped it into my Mini Misty, and I'm going to ink it up with some clear embossing ink. And I always like to stamp it up a few times. I'll pour on some white embossing powder. I'll gently flick off the excess. And then I can melt it with my heat tool. And I did this process twice where I stamped it and poured on the embossing powder and melted it. The two pink flowers I'm going to adhere down flat onto my card. I'm just using a little bit of liquid glue behind that. And then for the flower in the middle, I'm going to use the purple one, and I'm going to pop it up with some foam tape. I wasn't sure where to put the greenery or the leaves on this one. So I am going to cut it down just a little bit. And then I'll glue the leaf on. And I'll put some little foam pieces behind this one. This card has a lot of dimension going on with it. I'll definitely have to use more postage if I mail this one out. That's okay. And I apologize if you hear trains in the background. They just run constantly. There is a lake behind my house, and across the lake there is a train track. And it's really fun to watch, though. Right now, they have the cutest light red and pink and gray trains going by. It's just always fun to watch. But sorry for the noise. I just can't get voiceovers done without having to stop all the time for those. I used a leftover flower on the inside of my card and some of the pearl enamel dots. For card number 3, I'm using the tree branches background stamp. And I'm going for a tone-on-tone look for this card. I'm going to stamp it up several times. I'm going to stamp it first on a piece of pink cardstock. And I'm using some Distress Oxide inks. This one is called Worn Lipstick. And I'm going to stamp it up twice, but doesn't that look charming? And you will have to put these panels aside to dry for a few minutes, because the oxide ink takes a little bit longer than the regular dye ink. I'll wipe off my stamp with a microfiber cloth, and it's all ready to stamp out some yellow ink. This ink is called Wild Honey, and it's a little more orangey than yellow, but I wanted it to stand out from the yellow paper. And it's just a fun, subtle look. Next, I'm going to stamp out some cracked pistachio on my green cardstock. Once these card panels are dry, I'm going to cut them up into banners. A lot of different sizes of banners. But for my card panel that I'm going to use on my card base, I'm going to use a piece of craft cardstock and some craft ink. And I cut this out with a faux stitched rounded corner die. And I centered the stamp so it stamps out right in the center of this panel. It doesn't go all the way out to the edges, but I really love that look. Here are all my banners. And I just went ahead and fishtailed some of them. Now I can put my card together. This is going to be another spring card. It's going to say Hello Spring. And the hello word die is also from the In Love Arts shop that I used in a previous video. And now I'm just trying to figure out how I want to put these down onto my card panel. I'm going to glue all of these down flat, but I'm using little pieces of scrap paper where they overlap, just so that they are the same height. I clipped the hello off of the spring word die because I just wanted the spring part. And I'm just putting little dots of glue behind it. And I have to get the teeny tiny little eye out of the die. I'm just popping that out with my craft pick, and then I could adhere that over the eye. It's so little. I could have just drawn it in with a Jelly Roll pen or something, but that's all right. And now for my top banner. And I'll adhere the hello word die cut to this. This used to say hello autumn, but I just cut off the autumn. I really like to mix and match my fonts on my different cards. It's just fun. Now I can adhere it down onto a white card base. I go back and forth between using my dot liner adhesive and my liquid glue. I like to use them both. And here is the finished card. And I'm using leftover scraps on the inside of this one too. I really love making spring cards. It's so much fun. For my next card, I'm going to use this floral image on a piece of lavender cardstock. I love coloring in humongous floral stamped images like this, so I was really excited for this one. I'm stamping it out close to the edge of my card because I want to use that fun scalloped die on the bottom edge. And you'll see that here in just a minute. But I'm going to stamp it out with some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I wasn't sure, and here I forgot to pull off the acetate, so I have to reposition it. That acetate is hard to see sometimes. Here we go. I wasn't sure if I was going to stamp this out with purple ink. A dark purple ink I thought would be a lot of fun to try, but I really like a black stamped image. I'll stamp that out several times. And I do remember to leave the image on the door of my Mini Misty so that once I'm done with my coloring, I can restamp it and freshen up the lines. I'm using my Prismacolor colored pencils on this image, and I will have the colors that I use listed over at my blog, but I'm starting with the darkest color first, and then my mid-tone, and then I'm coming in with a white colored pencil just to add highlights. Where I place the white highlight, it really makes the image kind of pop up there and makes the leaves look curved. It's kind of fun. And then I'm using some teals on the leaves. I didn't know what colors to use on this image, so I went over to Pinterest, and they had this beautiful image of a cactus, and it had purples and teals in it. So that was my inspiration for these colors. It does take a while to color in, but I really enjoy using my colored pencils. And just remember to use a light touch so you don't hurt your wrist or strain it. And do lots of different layers. I did most of my coloring off camera for the sake of time, but I popped it back into my Mini Misty so that I can stamp the lines again. And the Prismacolor pencils can obscure the lines quite a bit, so I really like to do this step. I also used a sand-colored pencil around my image, which gives it a fun yellow glow. And now for my curved die. I'm going to chop off the two of the corners of this panel. And then I'm going to use the curved die with some dark purple colored paper. And I'm going to paper piece this back together here in just a minute. But I'm also going to pull out some striped colored paper, striped pattern paper at the bottom of my card. If you've watched my videos in the past, you'll know I love florals and stripes together. It just looks gorgeous. And then I can trim off the excess. I'm just adhering everything down flat onto this card base. And now for my floral panel, put that up at the top. And this is where I paper piece the curved die cuts back in. I use a little bit of liquid glue to do this. And that just makes a darling edge on this card. Something kind of different. You can do a lot with this die. I think it's going to end up being one that I leave out on my desk because I use it so much. I'll add some of the clear enamel dots across my card panel. And here is my finished card. I think this one is my favorite out of this set of cards I create in this video. On my next card, I'm going to pull out the embossing folder, and I'm using a piece of pink cardstock, and I ran it through my Sizzix Big Shot machine twice. A technique that I really like to use on my embossed paper is to blend ink on top of it. The raised lines of the embossing really catch the ink, and it brings out the pattern beautifully. I believe I'm using picked raspberry on top of this panel. Look how fun that is. You can really see the pattern now. I'm using another word die from the In Love Art Shop, and it says Happy Birthday. I love the scripty font of this one. And I'm going to glue several of these die cuts together. I have 3 cut out, but I just used 2 this time. It seemed to work just fine. And I'm just making sure everything is aligned perfectly. I'm going to adhere some green cardstock onto my card base first. I want to bring out some of the individual leaves on this embossed paper, so I'm using a green Prismacolor pencil just to add a little bit of color around the happy birthday sentiment. I had to sharpen my pencil several times because you need a really sharp tip to get into these little leaves. The Prismacolor pencils do snap and break quite easily, but I don't mind that because they do have a soft wax core and they blend together just beautifully, just like butter. I absolutely love my Prismacolor pencils. You can buy them open stock too, which is nice. You can get one pencil at a time. You don't have to buy the complete set. I'm using liquid adhesive to adhere my embossed panel onto my card base. I'm going to put a little bit of extra glue at the edges just because this panel was kind of bubbling up, just because it was embossed. This will hold it down tight. And now I can adhere my sentiment onto my card panel. I was just kind of holding it in place to see where I wanted to color in the different leaves. I love how the green leaves kind of frame the sentiment. It's so much fun. I'll just put an acrylic block on top of that for a few minutes until it dries. And I wanted to add a little bit of sparkle, so I'm pulling out my Spectrum Noir clear glitter pen and going over this black sentiment. I'll adhere a few of the clear acrylic dots on this panel too. Thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed my card projects. Stay crafty and stay well, my friends, and I will be back again soon with another card video. Take care. Bye.